to this session on case teaching in rural management. First of all, I thank Rekha ji and Prasanna Kumar ji that for inviting me to talk on this topic, which is very close to my heart. First, start with very traditionally we ask this question that what is a case? You know, before I start talking about case is a story basically, and the story is real. All cases that we talk about, it's basically story, and most stories are based on there's some real something, somewhere must have happened something similar, and except for extreme fantasies, more stories are based on real life. So when I talk about cases, I talk about stories, human stories. You know, from time immemorial, from Aesop and onwards, all great teachers of the world, they have used stories, nothing else. Because, you know, first thing about a story is that it catches our attention. A story, most stories will have different types of emotions. So it attracts people. It attracts our attention. And many things. It's, of course, the way you put up a story, the way you write it, it becomes interesting. I heard, though I do not have a television at home, so I don't watch television, but I have heard that nowadays, a few months back, maybe they started showing Ramayana and Mahabharata on television. And there was a lot of people they know the story, they have seen so many times, but still it attracts attention. People are, they get tuned to it. Okay, some stories are very powerful, and some stories, they touch our heart. And that is why the story format has been found from long time, since long. All these is Buddha, Christ, everyone, till Ramakrishna Paramahansa, everyone, they preach through stories. And stories are, in most cases, if it is handled well, if it is written well, if it is documented well, and if it is based on real life, they touch our heart, they educate us. They not only educate us, they don't not only give us information, they sharpen our skills, certain skills, analytical skills, skill to imagine things, to put yourself in someone's in someone else's shoes. So that is why stories have been great, storytellers have been great teachers, and stories have worked wonders. In fact, is a Harari, Yuval Noah Harari, and he talks about that everything in this world is a narrative. It's you have created a narrative, you create a story, and the stories become it shows us certain paths. Okay, so that is why when we talk about case teaching method, you know, there are two major philosophies in teaching technology, two major philosophies. One philosophy and one set of philosophers, they think that there is someone called teacher who has all the knowledge in this world, who is full of wisdom, which is actually not true. And that teacher has to come sit with the students and in very, very uncharitable word maybe I am using, but unloads all the knowledge onto the students, so the students will take it. And in most such cases, there is another belief attached to it, that students are not thinking, they are not reactive individuals. They are only recipient, which is not true, which is absolutely wrong. Teachers, students are great receiving. They are reservoir of, they receive, but they create. They are co-creator of knowledge. That once you have another, that okay, it is not one to many that you unload, but it is that they are co-creator of knowledge. Student, the teacher and the taught are, and they are like the two wheels of a cart. So they will have to go together. And that is where we call it that, so some people call it student-centric, I will say participant-centric education. One is a teacher-centric education. And so teacher will have, in teacher-centric education, teacher has all the knowledge, so no discussion, no dialoguing takes place. So it is the teacher gives whatever he or she knows, and then maybe at the end, like in this format we are going to do, which I do not enjoy much, but I will do it. But because in this format it is not interactive. It's not that a student you can do this. You can ask me questions here. I know that, but it's still remote. It's still remote. So you can ask me questions here. So here in case teaching, which is we call it a student-centric teaching methodology, there the students, because they are co-creator of knowledge, they can come, intervene, and they have this right. There's a dialogue that is taking place, and they say, so teachers actually does not say what it is to be. I'll come to that later. So they can say, okay, this is what I think is right, and this is why I think it is right. So they can do this argumentation. The second, so what are why should we use cases in a classroom context? That is what the second question is about. So if case is a story based on some real life, and there are two types of stories that, I'll go to that, but before that, let me tell you that there are two types of stories, two types of cases. I will use the term story and cases interchangeably. Many of my colleagues may not like this. But after teaching through case method in last 28 years, I have realized that, okay, we have, there's not one type of case. There are many types of cases. And there is a variety of teaching methodology that is involved in case. There is no one way of that this is the best way to teach case. No one can say that. I cannot also say that this is the only way of teaching cases. There are alternative ways of handling cases. It is only limited by the imagination of the case teacher, and that's what I am going to share with you. What I will share is my own, from my own experience of case teaching, and the feedback that I have received from my students in the last this 28 years, and my limited reading on the subject, on the topic. So I will do that. So the first thing, that why should we use case? The first thing about any teaching learning thing is that how do you, the question that every teacher has to ask and should be asking is, how do I create first interest of the student in the topic that I am going to deal? And that the first is interest. Second is that how do I keep that student motivated all through? Third, how do I, because without this first two, getting that and interested, that means the first attention, the fellow has to pay first attention to what you are saying. Second is, how do you keep the person continuously motivated? For example, in our management schools, usually we have a 90-minute session or a 3 hours. In Australia, I've taught for 3 hours, of course, with a break in between. I took a break, 15 minutes break, but it was 3 hours teaching, and mostly we will have 90 minutes teaching. And all through 90 minutes, it's extremely difficult to capture the student's attention, and that is where case method helps. If you are doing a lecture like the way I am doing it now, after some time it becomes very boring. It does not matter how good the person is, the professor is, how creative the professor is, but lecture after some time will put people to sleep. So keeping them motivated throughout. After having done this too, the third most important thing about case, and that is, some people of course put it as first, but I put it as third, that is developing the analytical ability of students. The students should themselves do the analysis. In the traditional teaching method, it is that there is some knowledge is static, give it to the students will reproduce. Rote learning, students don't understand. They are not capable of using it in their real life. Management, and that is where management, as I have had differences of opinion with many people, but I always say that management is it is an applied field. It is a discipline of practice. It is meaningless if you know 10 theories of management and you are not able to apply any of it. That knowledge of management is useless. So it's a field of practice, and one has to understand that how to every time. It is not just the concept. And in real life, let me tell you one interesting thing, that in real life, any situation, any problem that you face, it cannot be solved with one particular concept, or just understanding one construct will not help you. I was thinking, since yesterday I was thinking, I'll have to in this talk, maybe I'll have to introduce something that is very recent, which is happening to all of us. Like all of us are in our own homes. We are maintaining social distancing. We are not going out, and all this. Some of us may be more vulnerable than others, and so on and so forth. So, how do I bring about this something contemporaneous? And this is one to illustrate what a case can be. So I have circulated it. I will get back to it after a few minutes. I'll come back to that. So it is the analytical ability. The ability to be creative. It's not just analytical. One is analytical ability. The ability to synthesize from various different types of knowledge. Then to be creative, to be innovative. Can I find out some alternative ways of doing it? And that is why, when I talk about case method, I am reminded of what we call is the term education. It comes from the term educare, which one interpretation of it is that to opening up of mind. Many of the, I'm not saying all traditional methods, but many traditional methods, in fact, instead of opening up the mind of the students, they actually close down. So no questions, please. No argument. This is what it is. Because it has been written by someone else. Some great fellow once long back had thought that this is the right thing, that's why we take it. And we know, I'll just diversion, and this diversion, I thought I was reading one novel by Amitav Ghosh, and I'm forgetting that the situation is like this. One of the UP is from UP. He's part of the armed forces of East India Company, and he goes to village to recruit army people. And he goes to a person's place and says that, why don't you send your elder son to British East India Company? And this person says, no, I will not send. I will send him to Delhi to work for the Mughals. Then this person says that, this power, Mughals and others, all the state powers are going to die, because they have hung on to a technique, old technique. For example, he shows the swords, two types of swords. The swords that our Indian kings and Nawabs and Mughals used to use, the curved sword, and the straight road of the British. He said that it is so easy to fight with this straight road, straight road, that it gives us an advantage over the Mughals or Marathas or other forces, which we may feel very bad about today about it. But the problem was that Indian forces could not give up on their some improvement. All it needed was to change the type of the sword. It was not the only thing, but it was one of the things, and he explains that in that novel. So I take a clue from that we need to change, we need to adapt. And that one of the adoption is also, I'm not saying that there is only one way of dealing with cases. So there is no one case method. There are varieties of ways, and we have adapted through our experience in doing this. So what a case does is it has a deeper involved understanding of a context. You see, all management knowledge, it talks about, it has to be contextual. It cannot be acontextual. When we talk about rural areas, we are talking about a very different production system. We are talking about a very different social system. We are talking about a very different set of aspirations and ambitions, and which is actually based on, because that is how the life has been, because it is land-based agriculture. One very, very important thing about I ask people that when do you think about rural, what comes to your mind first? Okay. People will say this, that, many people will try to intellectualize and all that. Huh? But for me, I may be wrong, but for me, the prime thing that defines rural, that the first is agriculture, that is the land relations. The relationship of individual with the land, that most of the livelihood, large part of their livelihood, living, is some other, either directly or indirectly related to land. And so that itself, and the two things, another, it's not only just land, it is a generational relationships, the relationship that has been there since long. So therefore, when you have, I don't have a village of my ancestors here in this country, but when I go to my in-laws' village, and I find that almost everyone is related to everyone in that village. It's a relational thing. Everyone is related to everyone. They have long history going behind, and that's one thing that demarcates. In cities we come, and for example, I live in an apartment, and I scarcely know people, other people, I know, just I say hello, I don't know about their background, I don't know where they are from, and all these things, whereas in a village it is not like that. And many people ask me that, really, do you need a very different knowledge base for rural? My answer always has been, yes, we need because the contextuality is very different. So it is not only in terms of production system, it's also social and cultural systems. And based on this, their requirements, the needs will also be very different. So when we teach, and many of our students, and we'll have to understand this, then most of our students may not come from rural areas. They may not have a experience. I remember when you first confront rural life. My first job was as a banker, as a provisionary officer in a bank, and I was asked to, some 34 years back, I was asked to go to a rural area, stay there and work as a banker. And I remember when I first went, and it was almost a shock, cultural shock. I was for first few days, because I had never lived in a rural area. It was different, but slowly I tried to understand. Okay, what is the why I'm feeling so bad about it? And slowly I understood that there's nothing wrong in that sector. Something was wrong with me, because my mind was not trained to be there. And that's why my mind was rejecting the place. It was not the place which was rejecting me. It was just the opposite. So I had to retrain my mind. I had to look at things which ordinarily I would not. For example, I remember one thing. I just had gone there, and in a very remote area, and I actually did not know, those days I did not know how to cook. And I had problem in having food, because there was no restaurant in that village. And one person, he came forward and said, I will cook for you. Of course, I paid him a little bit of money, and he was cooking for me. But he was getting vegetables from someone's garden somewhere. I would, of course, pay him for the vegetable. And I had a very good time in that sense, which in a city I would not have had. So therefore, there is a contextual, and that is where the contextual difference has to come out. And that is why case, when we talk about a case, we transport, when we are discussing a case, we are transporting our students to that place, though they are physically in the classroom. It's like, when you are watching a movie, you are getting transported to that place. In that you are getting transported, you are identifying with the characters. Sometimes in case teaching, we sometimes ask the students to take up, we call it role play, to take up the role of a character, so that they can identify with the character and can start thinking that if they were there at that point in time, what would have been their reaction. Case method is also a good method, good way of building empathy, sense of empathy. So that people, we are human beings, of course, have empathy. There are cells which are empathic neurons. Mirror neurons are responsible for that. But it has to be cultivated. It has to be built up. And that you can do through cases. Sometimes it need not be just a case. It can be just a realistic story, which can, I'll tell you. When I was a young boy in school, we read a story. We had read a story. The story was very realistic. The story was like this: that there is this person who used to ferry passengers from a railway station to his village on his bullock cart. Every day he used to do that. That was his livelihood. One day, some person, he got a bus. And when the people from the station, they used to come, then they started getting into the bus, more and more bus, and people would avoid the bullock cart, because bus was two things: it moved faster, and it was cheaper, much cheaper than the bullock cart travel. And third is, it was more convenient. Those of you who have not sat on a bullock cart, let me tell you, believe me, it is very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Bullock cart, when it travels to the village roads, it is actually backbreaking. So they did not. But what happened to the bullock cart owner? After some time, he did not earn any money. And the same thing has maybe happening to many people now also presently. That he did not have any money. He could not feed his bullocks, so he had to let them go. And after that, at the end of the story, he and his wife, both of them, die of hunger. It was hunger death. The story itself was so overpowering. It actually was very emotionally, very touching for me at that age. I did not sleep for a few nights thinking about that person. Maguni was the character. The Maguni Rasagada, that is the bullock cart of Maguni. The point I'm trying to say that is how, because it creates empathy. But a good case teacher in management institution has some other additional responsibility, not only to create empathy, but to force the person to think. Force the person to think of a decision, think of something that where he or she has to take a decision. You know, human beings are cognitively lazy. Okay, take it from me as a psychologist. I'm saying that we are cognitive. So cognitively lazy. It's a very simple thing that will always try to find a shorter route to something, even. So it also helps us because we are cognitively lazy. We invented many things, many machines to help us. So, in a classroom situation, when people are forced to think in alternative ways, it enhances. And there is a competitive pressure. Please understand one thing about case method I should tell you. Case method cannot be done without a large group of students. I would say that anything between 20 to 60, 90, 60, I would say a good number, is what you need for and 30 is a good moderate, 30 to 40 is a moderate level of number of students in the class to have a meaningful discussion. You cannot have a case discussion with 2 students. So it is because why? The simple reason is that one is that when there are 40 or more students, there is a competitive pressure. I will have to think because others are thinking. So even though as an individual human being I am cognitively lazy, but I am forced to think. And that's what makes this is a very, very unique situation. Therefore, case discussion. What a case usually has. All cases has something called a decision. Most cases will have a decision problem. There are some cases, of course, we call those illustrative cases. They don't have a decision problem. You just to know about it is good enough. But most cases that we use in management has what we call is a decision problem. So you start with a problem. And in order to solve that problem, there will be a problem, but in order to solve that problem, you need some tools. And these tools are nothing but one is your existing models, existing theories, and your own innovative power. How can you innovate on this based on your existing knowledge base? So therefore, whenever we give a student a case, we also give them background reading material. That is that theoretical, whatever is available at that point in time, you give those background material to students. So that they not only read the case, they also have read the theoretical background to this, where they can actually use those as tools and also improvise on them. You don't just stick to that, but you improvise. So, the problem, whenever we discuss about a problem in a case, that most of in cases, the problems are not obvious. What you get is actually symptoms of a problem. Okay. The symptoms of a problem, we will discuss that later maybe, that symptoms of a problem. From the symptoms, we need to get into the problem. Someone has fever and cough and this does not mean the person has COVID-19. Okay? That may be something else. These are the symptoms may be same, but the problems may be, the root cause may be very different. People, when they have malaria, they also have fever. So the symptom may be same. So there are sometimes we call it that similar symptoms but different root cause or different problem, and those will have to take the students to that journey from symptoms to the problem. And once we have identified problem, we have not solved it, But once we have identified the problem, then we can, and that is why, that management guru, Drucker, yes. Drucker used to say always that, identifying the problem, that you have solved 50% of it, once you have identified the problem. So, you once you have identified the problem, then you come back and say, how do I solve this? What are the alternative ways of solving? There is and it depends on the teacher. I'll come to that, what sort of questions you should be asking the kids. But first thing is that, what are the different alternatives? It's that there's no one single way. There should be alternatives. When you force people to think of alternatives, their faculties open up. They are forced. That okay, this is. In my class, in class discussion, I first ask the students, what do you think of it? What do you think of it? And very systematically, whatever they at the beginning, I do that. I know, because that is, people will come at the surface level explanations. So I have my arguments to say, okay, how this is not possible, how this is not possible, and all that. So I become the devil's advocate. In fact, a good case teacher should be a devil's advocate, okay? Should not. Sometimes at the beginning, of course, when I start my sessions, when students are very raw, they have just come in, at the very beginning, I encourage them. I said, okay, this is a good point, we'll get back to it, but let me go to the other point. And that is how I slide some, what they use, I don't like the term, but I have heard people using the term, use some breadcrumbs. Give them to some breadcrumbs so that they stay tuned, but you will have to force them of the alternatives, to think about alternatives. And lastly, because real life, there are different alternatives, there are always alternative ways of approaching a problem, okay? And then make a decision and then check, of course, whether the decision has worked or not. So, when we say that they are it has to be student-centric. For example, let me first go to, I have given this. Just let me get some feedback here. That how many of you had time to go through this 2-page caselet? What do you think is the problem here? I think let's start with this. How to plan the storage? Yes. That's so we here have farmer have storage issues. Yes, storage is one of the problems. Yes, storage is one problem. Any other problem that you see? Yes. I think you are right that storage. So we have storage. Another is because of social distancing. We have the supply chain has hampered. You are saying that government plan generalized, but government will have to be generalized. You see, for government it is so difficult to have specific solution for individuals. There can be small farmers, like government of Punjab has done something like 50 ton per person can bring. Okay, if you have gone to in the case it says, somewhere also else it says that 30 ton. So let us take 50 ton that you can bring to Mandi. You can get coupon for 50 tons and 2.5 acres. So that is what a small marginal farmer and small farmers will have. So it is good for them actually. They will come once, but it's only for the middle farmer and the large scale farmers. They will have problem. But the point here is that there is a genuine, most of you have very rightly said that there is a problem if they harvest. They do not have space to store it and they will have to harvest. Like at the end of the case, you must have seen someone says that it is not like manufacturing cars. You can keep the car for some time. But if your crop is standing, it is ripe, you will have to harvest. And so the farmer cannot wait. And second, you see, what's the other problem? You know, there are problems of farmers not having adequate capital, money. So they will have to immediately stay. Even if they have store, they cannot store it. They will have to sell it in the market. And because there is a, sorry, there's an expectation that this year the harvest will be more, already the market has reduced the price. It has gone below the MSP. So there has to be something, maybe some other day, you can just think about it. Think about it, what can be the solutions that we can work out so that these problems are taken care of. Now what the farmers need now, then you can say, what can be an alternative arrangement? You see, one way always telling that government will do this, government will do that, government should do this. Government cannot do everything. Let's accept. Let's be realistic. So you see, what should be done? Now I have given you enough clue. In a class I would not give so many clues, but anyway, so that the farmers. So we have identified, one is storage, one is money. And even if they have storage, they cannot store it for the long time because they'll have to sell it because they need some money. So you will have to drive and are you getting that? Once you are forced to think that, okay, this is not a solution, just storage is not a solution. Just because, and there are so many people, they will have to say, for example, if you look at what is the everyday, how much they are able to take, some 3,119 kilograms. So it will take about almost 60 days for the whole, what we are looking at, 1,35,000, 1.35 lakh of tons of wheat. That has to be, for that it will take 60 days. So, the 60 days is a huge time for farmers to wait with the produce and stand there. So, what to do? Anup Sharma, you were saying representative could be allowed with slips of all group farmers, but they can only take this. Yes, that is one plausible, but money and all that, trust has to be there. Who will trust whom? Because they are not organized. They are not one. They are very different entities. Are you getting my point? Like, for example, let me ask you, would you trust your neighbor with your ATM card and the PIN to go to the ATM and get the money for you? He will certainly not do that. Sometimes, and though they are farmers of different villages, they may not be able to trust because they are not already organized. But you have given a clue to a solution. What are the solutions? And there can be many alternative ways. Yes, someone bring down transportation cost, but how it will happen? What is the process? You are actually getting into the solution, but what is the process to get into? Suddenly will it be possible for farmers belonging to different castes, different villages, just to trust each other and form group and reduce on transportation? There is always a danger of one fellow cheating the other. So what will bring about this change? Think about it. Okay, so there can be alternative ways of dealing. Like they may form a cooperative, they may form a farmers producers organization, they may form an informal club also, of course, depending on what sort of relationship they have among themselves, what is the law of the land, and there are other such things we'll have to take in. Like, for example, if they have a group which has lot of money, and the group can buy all the produce, all the wheat, and sit on the stock for some time till the market price it rises. Okay, this is how basis of all the milk cooperatives also, that you sit on the stock, allow the market, like for example, a year back, S&P milk international prices had crashed, gone down. But slowly people were sitting on it for some time, but then it has gone up. So they made money. Do you think government will have such efficient mechanism of collecting it? Yes, it is done. I think in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, it is getting done. And I think in Telangana also they have started this, that they are collecting at the farm gate. This is a new experiment in India, and we do not know. But still that price they are not getting when you are harvesting. And harvest time, always remember, the price of that agriculture produce is one of the lowest. So actually farmers can never make money, because when just before the harvest period, the prices skyrocket. That is the time farmers don't have any produce with them, so they cannot make money out of the market. It is the third party which makes the money out of the market. So you'll have to think about it. So what should the farmers do so that they can at least get the average rolling price of the year throughout the year, from the lowest to highest? If they can get the average rolling price, then they are much better off than what they are when they sell at the time of harvest. So there are alternatives will have to be thought of. I just use this case that you start a case discussion, you ask a general question, what is the problem? And then slowly when people start giving you the answers like I was getting here, and you say, okay, this is good, this is one way, this another way, but is that the problem? The problem is that, okay, what is our objective function here? Objective function is how do the farmers get the best possible price from the market, so they are better off. Okay, so that's what the orchestrating a case in the class is a very, very important thing. How do you orchestrate it? How do you bring in people? So there will be different voices. So what I do usually, so I will turn one person and said something, so I will turn to others and said, do you agree? Do all of you agree with him or her? And once you start this, then people start discussing. And from my experience, I will tell you that usually people will not say that we agree with that, because they also want to show that they are thinking individuals, they are thinking beings. Here, Anup Sharma, you have said, I'm sorry, I was, that the same way companies send goods from one plant to another, receipts are used. So you are saying that people will give, but receipts are slightly more valid when it comes from an organized source. When a receipt within the farmers as individuals, they do not really remain so valid. Even if organizations, I know the receipts of private parties that many times are dishonored. So we have these problems in real life, that receipts are not what actually you may have a receipt. The value of the receipt may be zero at the time actually when you are going to claim your share. That is why all these exchanges, commodity exchanges came up. Commodity exchanges came up because they will give this trust. And the trust, and that is why you need to have something, some entity in which people can have trust. And that is where we say that we need to have farmers organizations, robust farmers organizations, and these farmers organizations can be of different types. That of course is a huge debate, that what sort of farmer type for farmer organization will be needing, because as we have already discussed, that you cannot expect government to have hold on everything. It's very difficult. Because there are many layers in the government. Government is not just one entity. There are different layers. So in when we are discussing about case, largely the case has to be a slice of the real life. It is slice of a real life, the life that we are living. But every day, when I did, this was from today's or yesterday's paper, when I tried, I just wanted to show that every day things are happening around us in rural areas. We all of us know the plight. I did not share it with you, but I just read and it actually touched my heart that when a young girl, a 17-year-old girl, she committed suicide because she could not feed her younger siblings. And that's because the father is a daily wage laborer who could not, because of the lockdown, he did not have any income. And because no income, no food, so one person, because she did not like begging, and that's one. And she did, because she had to beg to get food, and she did not like begging, so she went and committed suicide. The point is that it touches our heart. It is, and it also opens up that as human beings, what responsibilities we have got towards the society, and how, in what way we can think of, at least suggest of, think of doing things which will actually leave us in a slightly better position than what we are. Is not finding ways to get back the migrant labor to reach their homes. Okay, that's a different topic altogether, though I just narrated because I was touched by it. It's a very different ball game altogether. Case analysis, case method can be so enriching both for the teacher and the taught. Every time I teach a class in the class, I see a new way. I said, oh, I never had thought about this. I see a question: can panchayat play role of authentic collection party sending goods from village? Yes, panchayat can play a very good role. In fact, I think in Andhra it is some village Sebaks, I think they are employed by the panchayat. They are doing the collection. So yes, panchayat can act as a. But you see, panchayat. Let me tell you, what farmers would really require. A panchayat is, let us say, it is a political and administrative entity. It can do its work, but there are certain, for example, business, when you are actually transacting goods or services, you are entering into a business transaction. So there maybe you need slightly more specialized of farmers organizations where farmers have control. They are not at the mercy of some other player. This one view, but let me tell you, there's an alternative argument that I came up in Africa, and I am not wishing it away. And the alternative is that sometimes the farmers have not, maybe for varieties of reasons, maybe educational backwardness and other things, have not been able. Maybe there are some corporate entities also, when they directly deal with farmers, then in that case also farmers are better. But the only problem is the farmers can never have what our objective function was, that the best, the medium, the average price, rolling price for a year of a commodity. And the average rolling price of a year, for example, in a year the base price is 10 rupees and the highest price is 20 rupees. And 15 rupees has been the median price. That is what farmers should be getting, median price of the year. If the farmer, then it is a good thing. But yes, panchayat can be, one can try out in the absence of that. But panchayat cannot be one of the best solutions, because panchayat has other responsibilities. And these two, both the responsibility may conflict with each other. The business responsibility and the responsibility of administering can may conflict with each other, and that's why we say that administering and doing a business activity are administering in a political sense, political administration sense, that when you are doing a political public administration, it has a very different objective than when you are having a business objective. The supply chain, as there is a shortage for storage. Yes, we'll have to shorten the supply. Yes, shorten it. That's a perfect nourish. And who will do it? We do not know who will. Panchayat, or should it be a farmers organization, or should it be a private another entity? Government can always bring in other entities who will, or there can be large number of auctioning houses that are allowed and take. So you can have alternatives. Another thing happens, let me tell you, as a case teacher. Many times, students, we give a lot of exhibits at the end of a case. Sometimes the case teachers also do not read the exhibits. Okay, and one of our objective in case teaching is to help students read the exhibits, take out, analyze the data that is given in the exhibits, and use that data to solve the problem that arises in the case. What's your opinion to selection of cases after post-corona period? You see, I don't know, we are getting into a very different world post-corona, but I don't think problems are different. I see, you see, and let me tell you, and I'm telling it from very core of my heart. My mother, when she was very young, she had faced in Bengal. There was I don't know whether you have heard about it, the Bengal famine. And Bengal famine was created by Britishers. And they diverted all the produce, rice, to Burma and also to the frontiers. And there was a huge famine. They did not have. My mother would say that so many people, and she said that when she was very young, of course, but Bengalis, they would not throw the skin of the potato in the middle class Bengali household. They would not throw the skin of, they will make curry out of the skin of the potato. So a sort of thing that changed the habits, people's habits, because of the extreme form of, and it actually did not, except for the rich, both middle class, lower middle class, and poor people died, and large number of them died. So the point is that post-corona, similar problem, which is not coming up now. Maybe we will have problems of people dying of hunger, which has already started. Rural people, I'm talking about rural people only, I'm not, maybe urban areas also it will happen. The rural produce not getting into the supply chain, that is another problem. So people will, the food will be that, from this newspaper reporting which we see today, that people will allow the food to rot in their field, and there will be, so maybe despite having bumper crops, we will have a problem of food. So I think rural problems, I think, will not be very different post-corona. Rural problems may get aggravated sometimes, because I do not know. Of course, I have no idea about it, when the government, how government aid will come, to whom it will come, whether it will be because I only heard, and pardon me for this if I am wrong somewhere, I only heard people were talking about MSME. And because MSME, they support large number of people, no one talked about that till date 60% of people are dependent on agri. They are not part of your MSME. They are nowhere near that. So these people are actually likely to be overlooked in the whole rebuilding of our nation, and that's the fear I have, because this is whole thirst is on industry, because there are few people, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people are there who are only talking about industry, and MSMEs maximum, their lip service is up to MSME, and these MSMEs and industries, they support less than 20% of the population for their livelihood. The 60%, 50 to 60% people livelihood is supported through agriculture or ancillary related to agriculture. If agriculture fails, dairying will fail, pisciculture will fail, and all they are interrelated. They form a huge ecosystem, And that is why I am saying that someone told me, "Arey, agriculture contributes 14% of the GDP." How? I said, it is not about what percentage of GDP it contributes, but how many people it carries on its shoulder. That is what is important. And that is where I have a strong opinion, and therefore, yes, we will have to see. Post-corona period is extremely difficult. I will not venture into any forecast, but I think times will be much tougher for them than what it will be for industry and others. I think industry will recover very fast. It is not. I don't think it will be a major issue. But rural areas will the shock, because you know, the point is that if some of us lose our salary for a month or two, in the middle class and upper middle class I'm talking about, we can still overcome, we can still tide over. We'll get into our savings somewhere, other relations, network. Those who are daily wage earner, they don't have anything. So the shock is much harder, much harsher for them. And most of the farmers in rural areas, most of the farmers are actually at that, no, they are in that horizon, that a border of nothing, having nothing in that sense. So you will have to think of that. What are the other ways? What is your view on students? Yes, students. Actually, students. Most of my cases that I have, whatever few cases I have written and published, my students have been a great help. I always have done it with my students, mostly. Rarely, I don't think I have ever done it alone, because they go to the villages. I also go with them, stay in the villages, collect data, and try to find. Not trying to find a problem, but trying to find what are the issues that the farmers, the people are facing, and maybe we develop from that. In case, and let me tell you about assessment part. I forgot that assessment. I usually give cases as my only one case, one long case for my midterm and end term. In all my courses, I do that. That's the standard procedure I followed 28 years. Rarely I give them a direct question. So I give them a case and I ask them to analyze the case. Of course, in the class we discuss it in certain format, and the similar format I expect them to write in the exam. And mostly I give, mostly I have always given open book exams for case analysis. So it's an open book exam, and they write the analysis and then we evaluate it. And of course, before evaluation, you will have to have an evaluation criteria, and that is the most back-breaking work. It is not the actual evaluation of papers. It is much before the evaluation of paper, we develop a scheme for the evaluation. And that what will get what weightage, what sort of evaluation, because in case analysis, there is no one correct answer. So there can be alternative answers. And because alternative answers, it creates so you will have to actually work very hard and to give this open book. For that you will have to work very hard prior to the exam, not after the exam. So they must know the criteria. You see, criteria, when we analyze the cases in the class discussions, I drive home this point that okay, alternatives. How do you evaluate alternatives? What is the criteria that you have developed a priori to evaluate this alternative? This we have already discussed. So they know that based on this, not the what should be the answer. Answer can be anything. Alternatives can be anything. But the process, whether they have followed the same process that which we have used in the classroom discussion. If they have followed the same process, no problem. Of course, there cannot be, that is why case analysis evaluation is always relative. It is relative grade. We call it relative grading, and I give relative grading. Someone is, it's like two algorithms. One is much better, looks at more elegant, algorithm, and that elegant. So for elegance, people get marks. So you can I can go to Bombay directly from here, Baroda to Bombay. I can also travel to Bombay via Hyderabad. But traveling from Baroda to Bombay directly is more elegant than coming via Hyderabad. So therefore, in the case analysis, also the same thing, that it is not whether you are reaching the same point, it is also how you are approaching that point. It is that, okay, what do you think is a much better way? For example, giving it to Panchayat. Panchayat is another institution. It's fine, you can do that. But would the farmer be better off if they had their own organization, and the organization which is given lot of resources? That organization can have this resource, and they can play with that resource. They can store the wheat for a long time, and they can sell it when the market is going really high and get all the money for the farmers. Now the point is that maybe there may be certain practical. Of course, this cannot be just the answer, because if you give this answer, my second question would be, how are you going to do this? In this country, most of the cooperatives have failed. Very few have succeeded. So how are you going to do this? What form of organization it will take? So these questions, that will lead to these questions. So I hope that I have been able to share some of my thoughts. And it was wonderful talking to all of you and getting your feedback and your comments here. And that really makes me very happy. And thanks a lot.